morning. It is the morning of day 13, and we're almost to the end of our 2-week journey to make a beautiful sourdough starter together. I'm happy that you're able to join me, and I've had such a good time. I hope that this has helped you learn how to take care of your starter, how to create it. And at the end here, we're going to start making some loaves. So I'm going to show you exactly how to make a leaven and how I do it and how I have success, and then some of the recipes that I use to make boules and other loaves. So let's take a look at our starters this morning. And first, let's take a look at our plan. We're going to check on our starters and make some observations. Then we're going to do our starter readiness test before we feed and prepare for tomorrow. So let's get to it. Here are my starters all snuggled up with their hot water bottle. Bob, same thing. It looks like it's just started to fall. But of course, those gluten-containing starters, they are just so easy to double in size compared to the non-gluten ones, the gluten-free ones. So here we are with Bob, and very, very active, more than doubled in size. And it looks like we just missed the peak. If you've heard that you can taste your starter to try to find out what stage of life it's at, you absolutely can. I don't like to, which is why I haven't mentioned it, but smell, taste, and appearance are all part of the readiness test. So your starter will taste a little more sweet and almost milky-like when it's young. It will start to taste more yeasty and kind of along with the smell, how you would expect it to taste as it's a mature starter, a little sweet and just a tinge of sourness. But as it becomes old and becomes more acidic, you're going to taste the acidity in the taste of the starter. So it's up to you whether you want to use this taste test, but it is very reliable, apparently. And I have tried it and I agree it does work. I just don't like to taste my starters because I don't enjoy it, but I recommend you trying it and see how it goes. Really, if we gave these just a little bit of a feed this morning, they would be ready to create a leaven in a couple of hours. So now you may be thinking, how do I know if my leaven's ready in a couple of hours? Well, I've created a readiness checkbox so you can decide if your starter is a mature starter and at its peak activity and ready to mix a leaven. So the first thing we need to look at is to use the rise timer. We're going to do that this afternoon or this evening, whichever fits your schedule. Then is to look at the appearance, which we've been talking about all along. Does it have those signs of being a mature starter? Does it smell like a mature starter? And of course, there's a last box if you'd like to decide to taste it. Does it taste like a mature starter? And if you say yes to all of those, then it's time to make a leaven, and we're going to do that tomorrow. So make sure to do the rise timer either this afternoon or this evening after your feed. And don't worry, it's really simple, but we need to do this rise timer in order to figure out the timing for your baking of your bread. Let's go through and just have a quick review of what the appearance, smell, and taste should be of a mature gluten-containing starter. Here is our gluten-containing starter, Bob. You can see the nice bubbles. And what I notice is that it will at least double in size. As you can see, Bob almost tripled in size last night. And what we're looking for there is that it has risen and it hasn't dropped down. And it's very clear with your gluten-containing starters. You will see, because it's so sticky to the side, you will see the line. So it will be rising up. And if you mark it, it should within 4 to 6 hours, it should at least double in size. If it is still rising when you make your leaven, you just won't have the exact same power, but within your baking that you would if you reach it right when it's at its peak. So just get to know your starter. Watch it every day. Try to see how long does it take. When it doubles in size within 4 to 6 hours, then it's ready to bake with. And at that point is usually around day 14, but some people, because of their warm environment, they get it speeded up. So yours might be sped up a bit. The first time I ever made a sourdough starter, mine took 16 days to do that. So I always tend to do it in the winter. Maybe it's because I love to bake in the winter. That's probably what it is, because I'm stuck inside, most of the day. I may as well bake. So that is one of the biggest factors that you want to look for. You also want to look for the smell. When you smell it, it should smell sweet and yeasty. And when it is ready, it will smell that way. And you will notice and you'll get to know your starter. the rise? Has it doubled within 4 to 6 hours? And then you're looking to see if the smell, does it smell sweet and yeasty? Then you're looking to see, is there a lot of activity? And you could see mine, when it is really at its peak, it has lots of big bubbles. So it has not only the little bubbles, but also the really big bubbles. And you'll notice that it is quite airy, like that balloon is being puffed up. So where the gluten-free one will look like an inflated hot air balloon that still has some creases, but gentle pillows, this one looks more like little individual balloons sort of popping up all over the place. And the whole thing bubbles up a lot and lifts. And you'll be able to see that. And just tons of activity there. You don't want to have any hooch on the top. If you have that, it means that it is way past. It's hungry and it is now an old starter. So look for those things with your regular sourdough starter. If you have achieved that, then you are ready to create your leaven. All right, so let's give these a good feed. He actually did really well last night, even in the cold. He rose and barely fell this morning. So I'm going to feed exactly the same. So again, it is different depending on how your starter is doing. So you're using your intuition based on what you see is happening and not necessarily just, oh, it's cold, so I need to feed it less. Because if your starter is eating all the food and rising perfectly, then it's okay. You've got the right balance and the right ratio of starter to flour and water. So just continue with what you're doing. So let's go ahead and start to discard and feed our starters while I talk to you about the readiness checkbox. So I'm going to feed my starter and I want to find out the time that it takes to reach its peak. So I'm going to keep the feed the same as we have been doing. Then I have a base to know how long does it take when I feed this amount, and I keep it at room temperature. So I'll discard all but 30 grams of starter and feed 50 grams of flour and 50 grams of water. So the reason that we want to know this time to peak is that we need to be able to have the best activity, the most activity out of the yeast possible. And the best way to do that is to always feed our starter when it's at its peak. Because if we know exactly how long it takes our starter to reach its maximum rise, then we're able to feed it at that time and plan our schedule for baking our bread around that. So this is why it's important to do the rise timer. So, okay, what is this rise timer I'm talking about? It's just a name that I gave to a sort of basic scientific process that we're going to do that will measure the time that it takes for the starter to reach its peak. But of course, this will change with changes in the environment. So you do have to do this rise timer test throughout the year when the weathers change, or if your starter is changing environment in any way, different changes of water or possibly even changes of flour. So all of the factors that we talked about really in our 3 keys to success will impact not only the health of the starter, but also the peak rise time. So it's super important to know the time to peak because that will give you the maximum rise to your bread. If you feed your starter to create your leaven when it's at its peak, and then you use your leaven when it's at its peak, then you will always get the maximum rise possible because you have the maximum yeast activity and the most carbon dioxide produced. Really, the amount of rise that you get from your bread and the amount of open crumb that you get really has to do with the health of your starter and the timing of creation of your dough. So now you're probably wondering, well, how do I do it? Let's get to it. Well, it's simple science, really. You're just going to observe and record. I'm going to show you in this video exactly what to do with some photographs of my starters. So we will go through that now. Right below this post is this readiness checkbox. So feel free to print this off so that you can use it at home. So now that we've been reminded of what the mature starter looks like, we can start filling out our readiness checklist. First, we need to do our rise timer. So we're going to watch our starter after we feed our elastic band is our start time. Then every 30 minutes to 1 hour, check on your starter and draw a line at the level that the starter is at that time. Then you can see how far your starter has risen, and it's quite fascinating to see at the different stages of the life cycle of your colony of microorganisms how quickly your starter will grow. Remember that the temperature affects this as well. So if it's really cold, it's going to rise a lot slower than if it's really warm, it's going to rise really quickly. So you're going to need to check your starter at intervals based on what you see happening. Then basically you just watch your starter, and when you see that it has peaked and the next time you check it has lowered a bit, you calculate the exact number of hours that it took in order for your starter to reach its maximum peak activity. And remember, all starters are different. So some will rise and double, and some will only increase about a third. And it really depends on the strength of the colony and the type of flour that you've used. But you can see here, I'm using my wheat starter, and you can see where it has risen to the peak and then it has dropped. So that's why it's important to see that line. We can see that it never went above that line. So 1:30 was the peak activity. So I know that between 10 a.m., I fed my starters late this morning, and 1:30 it peaked and it more than doubled in its height. And once you see that it has reached its peak and it has fallen back down, record the time. If you're within the time frame, you're all set to go. And please remember that the temperature definitely affects this time to peak rise. So if your home is very cold and your starter isn't able to stay within the ideal temperature range, it will take longer than 4 hours potentially. And I want you to be totally prepared for tomorrow, and I hope you're as excited as I am to make our first loaf. So we're going to start with the preparing of our starter tomorrow. So make sure you have enough water, and if you're going to make your own aquafaba, make sure you get that going as well. Gather the rest of your supplies and complete your readiness checklist, and I can't wait to start with you tomorrow. And if you've enjoyed this series so far, I'd be ever so grateful if you would write a comment in the section below and give it a star rating. This is how Google finds me and my site and my recipes, and so more people can find them. And I would be ever so grateful if you would also share this ultimate video guide photograph pin that I have right below this video onto your Pinterest page. Thanks so much. So make sure you observe and record your starter's height for your rise timer either this morning or this evening after its feed. Just make sure if you do it this evening that you feed early enough that you have enough time for it to reach its peak rise. Have a great day. I'll see you soon.